Working with children whilst directing a commercial. Process, challenges, and the cash when directing, or should I say co-directing, something like this. I mentioned recently that every directing job is different, and this was another one that was a bit more out of the ordinary for me than usual, as I was effectively co-directing with one of the in-house creatives from the brand, a multi-talented editor / After Effects extraordinaire who had, along with the rest of his team, developed 95% of this spot before I was even involved. The production company behind this was Arillo Films, that has a close working relationship with another production company I work with here in London frequently. Jordan there, who had been on a couple of shoots with me via this production company relationship, had recently DP'd a fast turnaround Mackey's content job with me that crucially featured children. Just like cars, beauty, fashion or food, children are a niche in the world of directing. And the brand were looking for a director with experience working with children and in the bright poppy colour to the world they were creating for their ad. Jordan recommended me, and I was added to the pile of hopeful directors and asked for a few examples of relevant work and some words explaining why I was best suited for the job. I put together this, showing previous work with young children, as well as poppy colorama looking type stuff. I get the child performances request, but the art direction and cinematography style is a weird one because they had very clear references of what they wanted in their briefing deck. So as I so often think when I see stuff like this, we can make it look however you, the client, wants it to look. But I guess when you haven't worked together before and there's not that trust there yet, they want to see that you've done it all exactly before how they want to do it this time. Their lighting references were a little flatter than 90% of my work, and they did come back asking for more examples that had similar lighting to their reference photos. I explained I didn't have those sorts of examples in my work, but was more than capable of working with Jordan, the DP, to create the sort of lighting they were after based on their reference images. Inevitably though, like all good DP and director combos, we would try and add the slightest bit more shape into the images where we could when it actually came to the shooting. But no matter what you do on the day, as you can see here on screen, the grade plays quite a big part in the result of the finished look. The grade that neither myself nor Jordan had anything to do with. After their minds were put at ease, I eventually got a confirmation via Emma, the producer, saying I'd got the job and the dates were confirmed. For me, pre-production really involved very little as far as these shoots would normally go. Paul, the in-house creative that was heading up this project, really was tackling most of the tasks normally handled by the director. I had 2 calls, including the PPM with all the clients from the brand and the producer over Google Meet, a call and chat with Jordan the DOP about everything in terms of camera and lighting, a call with Mickey, my first AD, Emma the producer, and Jordan the DP again about schedules. Oh yeah, and also I had a call to run through all the props with the art director. But this was really more for me to be in the know, if anything else, as the clients had already given thorough lists of what they wanted, and there was a ton of meetings and prep that had taken place without me. So I just wanted to make sure I'd be up to speed for the shoot days. On one of the earlier calls with the client, I'd suggested that I would put together an animatic based on the storyboards that Paul had created, along with the VO and some guide music, to get an idea of timings for camera. But after I'd made the time to do that the next morning, I was sent one they'd put together in-house since I'd suggested it. So keen not to make a habit of getting wires crossed throughout this process and having a bit of a blurry, undefined line of what my roles and responsibilities actually were on this shoot, I had a brief catch-up call with the producer to ask if she could have the awkward conversations without me on the line, so no one was being polite for the sake of me being there. I didn't want to assume any roles that a director typically would through fear of stepping on anyone's toes, but was also aware that they'd hired me for a reason. So after a few conversations and some nudges to Emma with questions like, any more info I should be aware of? Want me to do anything in terms of prep? I was reassured that my main purpose was just to direct the talent on the shoot days and communicate with Jordan DP. And on the shoot day, I would be directing in the eyes of the heads of departments and the cast, so as not to create any convoluted confusion on sign-offs when working with so many people and so many moving parts. I would then report to Paul, who was effectively, at least in my eyes, from what I'd come to understand, the director and lead creative on this project. There was the client, yes, which was all of them collectively from the brand, but he was my client. I would make suggestions and proceed as normal with the crew, but ultimately I wanted to make sure that he was happy at the end of the day. We had 1 pre-light day and 2 shoot days across 3 purpose-painted studios, 1 for stills and 2 for the actual shoot. Pre-light day got cut in half at the last minute, which wasn't the end of the world for lighting necessarily, but it did make life more stressful for art department, who had a ridiculous amount of props to get ready, with not much else to do other than sit around and look like self-important wankers. After we'd helped loading kit and talked through everything in the schedule again, with a few last-minute changes so we were absolutely sure everyone knew what they were doing, First AD, Mickey and myself got stuck into building some flat pack before we had to leave the studio and not go into overtime. Day one began with a quick trip to Tesco en route to pick up some sweets. I'm not a sweet man myself. I'm a chocolate man. And I know that some of my more precious parenting friends would probably scowl at this. But I also know, having worked with children, that their energy shelf life is a bit shorter than when working with adults. And once their energy's gone, they are really hard to restart. So I figured a few bags of sugar in my back pocket wouldn't be the worst idea if we needed to kickstart any lagging performances, with permission from the parents, of course. I also packed my Nintendo Switch, ready to keep any young gamers entertained in between setups. There's a lot of rules around shooting with children. The younger they are, the more strict they get. As well as being chaperoned by a parent, a third AD was also assigned as their liaison whilst on set, and they're only allowed to be on camera for a limited number of hours per day. So the whole schedule is actually structured purely around them. We had a sizable crew on this one. Producer, creative director, shoot director, me, a DOP, assistant producer, first AD, second AD, third AD, first AC, second AC, grip, gaffer, 3 sparks, a lighting trainee, art director, 4 art assistants, hair and makeup assistant, stylist, a stylist assistant, DIT, and 2 runners. Stills had their own thing going on with a crew of 6 in the third studio. There were 4 cast members, all their chaperones, and 5 additional people from the brand. The day began with catching up on the incomplete art department on our first set, lighting tweaks and finessing until the client was happy before we brought our first cast member on to start shooting. 3, 2, 1, big smile, action. It's not quite working, is it? Because we need to see the bottom of the basket. Getting the performance you want out of children can be harder than when working with adults. But he did a great job, and we got what we needed in the can before moving on to our next setup in the afternoon in the other studio that was already fully painted and pre-lit from the day before, whilst Art finished dressing it. I read a comment recently telling me how unprofessional I was for having called out one department's lack of doing their job on a particular shoot. But on the very few occasions that I have done this in the past, I've never named and shamed the individual directly. And I know putting my professional life on the internet can be a dangerous game to play. But the purpose of this channel is not to paint a picture of what a wonderful world where everything always goes right and it's fantastic to work in this industry, because it's not always like that. The purpose of this channel is to depict what it's actually like on real sets and what really goes wrong. So hopefully in the future, you can look out for these pitfalls, and selfishly, so I can look and analyze these jobs and learn from them too. This reflecting on jobs in such an analytical way has better helped me to learn from the jobs themselves, whether that's how better to communicate with someone, what not to do with a lighting setup, or who not to work with in the future. When I'm breaking down a job, without being hopefully too mean, I want to be very honest and open about how these experiences that I am experiencing go. That all said, because the one thing that let this job down whilst we were actually on the shoot was the art department. Second, the performances, of course. The job hung on the art department. It was a lot of work for them, no doubt, but they had budgeted 6 full prep days, as well as the pre-light day. They had more crew than any other department helping them, and so many things were just not communicated. For example, props that were going to be sourced and then just weren't. Barely anything had been pre-built, painted or wrapped during the paid prep time when it should have been. There were some strong individuals within the department, of course, trying their best with what they had, but overall it was just a bit of a mess. Benefit of the doubt, as always, to look at both sides of the coin. I don't know what was going on in their life. Maybe they were dealing with some personal stuff and were distracted, or maybe they'd taken on too much work and were just overwhelmed. There was one particular prop that was fantastic, but most of it was just chaos, and it made us all look bad to the client. Not having been privy to the meetings they had, which I wasn't involved in due to this co-way of working on the job, there could have been certain elements that perhaps tripped them up coming from the client. I don't know. Maybe there were last-minute changes, but I went through everything with them a couple of weeks prior, and I saw everything they had promised on the PPM. And even ignoring all of that, The amount of times I witnessed them literally not doing anything related to this shoot on the shoot days, when we were all rushing to play catch-up, largely due to their department's shortcomings, gave little chance to me rushing to work with them again anytime soon. Now, I hope sharing any of that wasn't too brutal. They're not a bad person by any means, they just didn't do a great job. I've not featured them in any of the behind-the-scenes footage, so there's the truth without hopefully being too unprofessional by sharing the truth.
2, 1, action.
On to some positives. The next kid also smashed his performance, and his energy levels were exactly what we needed. Lunch both days was also banging and well portioned, provided by the team on site at Holborn Studios. Jordan and his camera and lighting team were all lovely, warm-spirited people, which is what you need on a shoot like this. In fact, I can't really fault anyone else's enthusiasm or energy on this job.
What does the first AD think in times like this?
Smile
Yeah?
and pretend that everything's fine.
Mickey, my increasingly go-to first AD, kept the ranks in order best she could and did a great job of not making me look like an arsehole, as she always does. And all the kids really did give it their all. The girls that joined us on day 2 crushed it. I got very excited about a second's worth of insert shot of a girl walking up some steps when Jordan the DP and Mo the Grip combined tracking, jibbing, panning and tilting at the same time to create some sweet looking parallax.
I mean, you know?
But naturally, that shot didn't make the final cut.
So good.
Not wanting to put everything on art, I also ballsed up, but was quick to rectify it. I wanted to give Paul some keyable confetti to use when stitching 2 scenes together with a whip transition. And we tagged this in the schedule on the end of shooting one of the scenes. But not long after shooting it, I realized I'd forgotten to ask Jordan to decrease the shutter angle. And when keying something like confetti falling on green screen, the amount of motion blur that would have been in the original take would have been a terrible key in post. So I alerted the first and the DP as to my mess up and asked if we could find 5 minutes just before lunch to rig the green screen in the other studio and pick up the shot.
3, 2, 1. 2, 1.
Also, it was DP Jordan's birthday on the first day. I should have mentioned that. We went out for a drink after we'd wrapped, and Emma, the producer, had even gotten him a cake, but we were so busy that we actually forgot to get it out for him. Sorry, John. The clients on this were as measured as clients get in their feedback. They weren't too picky, nor were they too easily pleased, but everyone seemed genuinely happy at the end of it all. Paul, the in-house creative that was the vision behind this all, was super easy to work with, a very polite individual that knew what he wanted, and on occasion, I would try and offer him a little bit more too, so at least there were some options in the edit. I did a classic back and forth awkward song and dance of rates on this one, but it actually ended up quite lucrative for the amount of time that I actually spent on the job. The producer had asked me for a rate when putting together the proposed budget, even before I'd been selected as the chosen shoot director. I asked what kind of job was it, but couldn't really gauge at the time, so shared that my asking rate was £5,000 a shoot day, as on a number of jobs this year, that's what I've been getting. It was signed off, but originally a 1-day shoot though, and when it was extended to 2 days, it was negotiated to a £7,000 buyout. For all of my prep time, which, as you've seen, wasn't much at all compared to most jobs, the pre-light day and the 2 shoot days. Although leaving a job at this point gives you zero control on the ultimate output of everything, it was never really my project to exercise that control on. The finished ad is what it is. I'm happy, the client was happy. But creative aside, there's a few things I would change about it. Mostly the grade, if I'm being fully honest. It's not exactly the choices myself nor Jordan the DP would have made, but there's always a reason for everything. And like I said, past the shoot day, it wasn't my job to be worrying about these details in the first instance. So not one for my show reel, but a great payday and work with a client and crew I'd love to collaborate with again, for the most part. Be a legend and give the video a like below to let me know you made it this far. You should watch this video next for more tales from behind the lens. And make sure to subscribe for more semi-helpful tips and interesting insider industry knowledge.